Lost a lot of things in my life. I've lost some money, almost lost a house, lost a job, lost some loved ones. But even in the midst of all that, the one thing that I never lost was my praise. Because the Bible says that God inhabits the praises of his people. If you're looking for God, give him a praise. God bless you this morning. I'm grateful to our pastor for this opportunity to stand before you. I ask that you will flank me with your prayers this morning. Satan tried to hit me with some kind of sinus attack in the middle of the night. Felt fine. Woke up about 4 o'clock and whoop, there it was. But as we used to say in the Baptist church, if there's prayer in the pews, it's power in the pulpit. So if you pray for me, be able to make it through. You have your Bibles, or if you want to look on the screen, if you can turn to 1 Kings chapter 5, and we're going to look at a few verses here. 1 Kings chapter 5, starting at verse 1. And I'm reading from the English Standard Version. It says, "Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants to Solomon when he heard that they had anointed him king in place of his father. For Hiram always loved David. And Solomon sent word to Hiram, 'You know that David, my father, could not build a house for the name of the Lord, his God, because of the warfare with which his enemies surrounded him. And the Lord put them under the soles of his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor misfortune. And so I intend to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord said to David my father. Your son, whom I will set on your throne in your place, will build the house for my name.'" If you skip down to verse 17. "At the king's command, they quarried out great costly stones in order to lay the foundation of the house with dressed stones. So Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders and the men of Gebal did the cutting and prepared the timber and the stone to build the house." Got one more verse. Chapter 6, verse 7 says, "When the house was built, it was built with stone prepared at the quarry, so that neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron was heard in the house while it was built." You may be seated in the presence of the Lord. And just for a few minutes, I want to talk to you about, you have no idea what it took for me to get here. You have no idea what it took for me to get here. Have you ever watched gifted athletes or anybody who's gifted in something? Watch LeBron and just see how effortlessly he makes playing basketball look. And it almost looks like he just wakes up in the morning and greatness was just on him. Or have you ever heard someone sing a song? And you hear the melodies and the runs and you're like, he or she just makes it seem so effortlessly. They're just so gifted, so talented. But what we never see are the hours of practice that LeBron puts in, or the number of songs that someone forgot the lyrics or missed the notes. I'm just talking about myself. I forget song lyrics all the time. Miss notes all the time. But sometimes people can do something in such a way that you almost look at them in awe and amaze, and it just seems like they're just so great and good at what they do, but you don't see the hard work that they put in order to get to where they are. One of my pastoral preaching mentors, Dr. Alex Moses, who just retired from being the pastor at Eastern Star Baptist Church, always says, people see the glory, but they don't know the story. People see the glory. They see what we look like on the outside. They see the jobs that we have, or they see the cars that we drive, the houses that we look in, and people automatically assume it must be nice to be that person. But we don't know about the number of cars that they've wrecked, or the number of jobs that they've been fired from, or all the difficulty that they had to go through in order to get to where they are. All we see is the results. And sometimes the results can fool you. You know, that saying that the grass is always greener on the other side. And sometimes you get to the other side and you realize it's AstroTurf. Well, there's a reason that this grass is so green, because it ain't real. And there's a whole lot of fake folks running around, look all green, until you really get up on them, and then you realize, oh, he ain't, he looked fine from a distance. But now that I got to know him, and there's a whole lot of fine, ugly folks running around. Look good on the outside, but the insides are all, the heart is jacked up. Motives are messed up. So you can't always just look at the results. Can't always look at what it seems like or where it seems like someone is, because we don't always know how they got to where they are. If you were in Sunday school for maybe about a month or so ago, we learned how David had a desire to build a temple to his God. But David, as the text we just read says, was a king of warfare. We talked about it a little bit in Sunday school this morning. And the prophet Nathan goes to David and says, yeah, you want to build this temple, but God is not going to allow you to be the one to build it. However, because you have a heart for God and you want to build a house for him, God's actually going to build a house for you. And Nathan tells David that even though you won't build the temple, I'm going to establish your family, and your son Solomon will come after you on the throne and build the temple. So the text tells us that Solomon, as he comes into his kingship, builds a relationship with one of his father's friends. And a lot of us are the recipients or benefactors of relationships and things that our parents did before we got here. I know when I first got into the ministry, there were pastors who would call me and say, hey, I heard that you're in the ministry. Your father helped me. I want to give you an opportunity to come preach. So Solomon builds this relationship with Hiram. And Hiram was known to be a great builder. He was a master mason. And as Solomon forges this relationship with Hiram, Hiram gives Solomon resources from his land. He gives him timber. He gives him stone. He also gives him workers to help build the temple. So Solomon and Hiram, who was not a worshiper. He didn't follow God Jehovah, but he had enough respect for David and for David's son that he wanted to help him build this temple. And truth be told, everybody who's helped us out ain't always been a Christian. There have been some folks who've helped us out along the way. Now, hopefully, what we did was we shared the word of God with them. Because what we want is for, as Solomon prayed in our Sunday school lesson, for the world to know the God we serve. So if you can, just for a few minutes, walk with me as we go to the mountain where Hiram and Solomon are overseeing the work that's going to happen before the temple was built. On the mountain, you would see thousands of workers there, and Solomon and Hiram kind of being the foreman, if you will, directing the work. All the tools would be there, tools that a builder or a mason would use. We see in the text that, number one, there were great costly stones that were going to be used in building the temple, because only the best will do. We couldn't just use any old kind of stones to build the house for God. And let me pause there and say, the temple that Solomon built would not have been the only temple that was being built at the time, because there were other people who worshiped other gods who built temples to their gods. But Solomon knew that he wanted this temple to stand out from all the rest. So he couldn't cut corners in building the temple. And whenever it comes to worshiping God and serving God, you and I need to give him our very best. We can't cut corners when it comes to serving God. There are no shortcuts in serving in the kingdom. Great costly stones. And then the text says that there were dressed stones. And these dressed stones were the stones that were cut out of the mountains that are then hewed or refined and perfected for the temple's foundation. Now, when you get over into what we read in chapter 6, verse 7, it says that there were no tools heard in the temple while these stones were being put in. So no one was chiseling on any stones in the temple. Now, if you were to go back and look into the Mosaic law, you would find that God required that iron was not to be used in building the altar, nor could there be hewed or shaped stones. God required you go get the stones, leave them in the condition that they are, because man cannot shape what really belongs to God. So you and I come to church. This ain't our church. This church belongs to Jesus Christ. Upon this rock I build. He didn't say I build Charles's church. Upon this rock I build my church, and the gates of hell should not prevail against it. You can't just use any old thing in building God's kingdom. So these stones, when they were building the altar, they couldn't use iron because iron represents sinfulness. And Lord knows you can't use sinful things and build something for God. So God says, just get the stones, leave them as they are as you build the altar. But when it came to the temple, you can't build. Could you imagine if there were just rocks around the property and we all just went and got some rocks and tried to build this building with just rocks that we just got out of the ground? No shape to the rocks, no finished look. Church be leaning on one side, water be seeping in. So if you're going to build a temple, there had to be some work done in order to get the rocks in the shape and the form that they needed to be in. But you have to understand that back then, people literally believed that God lived in the temple. The temple was not just a place for worship, it was his house on earth. So when you see them talking about no tools were used at the temple, maybe it had to do with the Mosaic law and the requirement to not use tools of iron. But maybe it was because Solomon understood that I don't want to disturb God while he's resting in the temple. So all the work that was done on the rocks was done at the quarry. They used saws to cut out the rocks. And then first of all, the rocks would have been most likely limestone, because limestone rocks are easier to cut out from the bed. And then as it gets exposed to the air, they harden. They would have used wooden wedges, hammer them in between the cracks. And then as those wedges were soaked with water, placed in the cracks, they expand. And as they expand, it would have loosened the rocks so that they come out easier. We'd also see some hammers. Hammers mentioned saws that were used to cut the rocks out, to remove the stones from their rock beds. And no doubt, no good mason would be without a chisel. And that chisel and that hammer were used to shape the rocks into the form that they needed to be in before they were placed for their purpose. You and I are kind of like those rocks. The difference is rocks can't move when the master mason is chiseling away at the rocks. You and I see God coming with his chisel, and we want to get out of the way because we know what's coming. I don't want you chiseling my attitude off of me. I don't want you chiseling my lack of faith off of me. I don't like how this feels. But if you and I can learn to just allow God to just keep on. And what they would do when they would chisel the rocks, you got to chisel it, step back and look at it. It's not quite where I want it. I got to chisel a little bit more attitude off of here. I got to chisel a little bit more doubt off of here. I got to chisel a little bit more lack of faith off of here. And then he steps back and he looks at it again and he says, okay, I got that side chiseled, but now I got to chisel this side so it matches the shape on this side. But once he would chisel the sides and they get all the impurities off and get it into the shape, then they had to dress those rocks. And I imagine it's almost like watching someone who shines shoes. You ever watch, and I ain't talking about like, just somebody who says, hey, let me shine your shoes. I'm talking about a professional. You ever had a professional shine your shoes? And there ain't nothing like sitting in the chair and watching them go to work. And they put the stuff on, and then they get the buffing and step back, spray some water on it, shine it up a little bit more. That's how it was when they were dressing the rocks. It means they were smoothing out the rough places. They had to chisel it into shape. But then, we still got a little rough spaces. I come to church, but every once in a while, I'm in the shape that I'm supposed to be in, but every once in a while I still like to. And so God has to dress us. He's got to smooth out the rough places. Yeah, you could be used, but you're not your best self until he smooths out the rough places. And if you and I can get through the chiseling, sure enough, we can get through him smoothing out the rough places. Then they would use a plumb line to make sure that everything was level. Anybody that's ever tried to build something, who knows how to build something, knows if it ain't level, it ain't gonna fit. And so they would use that plumb line to make sure that all the sides were level. Smooth it out, make sure it's level. But when I read the text, I realized something was missing. Miss Emma, they didn't explain in the text how the stones got from the quarry to the temple. And the dimensions of the temple said that the temple was 90 feet long. So these rocks, they weren't like these monitors. These had to be huge rocks. And so if you weren't in the quarry and watching the masons work on the rocks, and all you saw was the stones, you think they just showed up like that. And there's a whole lot of folks that look at our lives and think we just showed up like that. But they weren't with us when God was. When he was working on us in the quarry. If we could take the time to tell our story, sure enough, and some of us, I'm still in the quarry. Whew. And I don't know if I'm between the chisel or him smoothing out the rough places. Sometimes I feel like, okay, he's done chiseling on me. But then I look back and here he comes with the chisel again. But I know one day he's going to step back and look at me and say, I've chiseled you all that I need to chisel you. I've smoothed out the rough places. And now I'm going to fit you into your calling, fit you into my purpose. People are going to look and say, how did you get that job? How did you get that wife? How did you get that man? And you look at them, you tell them, I don't know. All I know is it took a whole lot of chiseling. It took a whole lot of work. And you have no idea what it took for me to get here. Don't look at where I am now. Next time somebody looks at you and says, you know what? You need to go to the gym. You could stand to lose a few pounds. You look them in their beady little eyes and you say, you know what? I might not be buffed, but I'm chiseled. I might not have all the physical, but God has been working on me. And because God has worked on me, I can do what he's called me to do. Because God has worked on me, I can serve him the way he wants me to serve. Because God has worked on me. And stepped back and said, now, I don't know when that now moment comes. Only God knows when it comes. But I'm going to tell you something else, and I'm going to take my seat. not only will he step back and say, now it's time for you to fit into your purpose, but one day he's going to step back and look at all of us and say, Brooks, well done, thou good and faithful servant. You've been faithful through the chiseling. You've been faithful through me smoothing out the right places. You've been faithful through the hard times. You've been faithful through the difficulty. Come on in and let's celebrate. Because one day, whether you believe it or not, he's coming back. He's coming back. And I want to be with him in the air. I want to be with him in glory. I want to be able to say, thank you. Thank you for chiseling on me. Come on, stand on your feet. Deacons, decision, and counselors are coming. You might be here today, and you might be in the quarry of life. It might feel like all hell has broken loose. What helps is having a relationship with Jesus Christ. I can't promise there won't be pain. I can't promise there won't be difficulty. But Jesus gives us that hope, the ability to praise. If you're here today and you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, won't you come? Or perhaps you're here, you've been running from church to church. You need to be rooted and grounded, forsaking not the assembling of the saints. Greencastle is a wonderful church who loves God and loves people. Perhaps you're here in the need of prayer. Our deacons and decision counselors will pray with you and pray for you. If you're in any one of those categories, without Christ, without church, without or in need of prayer, won't you come?